welcome everyone. Good afternoon if you're with us live. If you're not, thank you for viewing this recording of the webinar focused on navigating the social, and I'll put it in quotes, safety net. That'll be part of our conversation today. We have a distinguished group of researchers, community partners, panelists who have been working on issues to support our low-income populations for decades, and what they'll bring to the understanding of what we need to do next, I think, is essential and really will lead us to a call for action. My name is Gary Painter, and I'm the director of the Sol Price Center for Social Innovation in the Price School of Public Policy. Our mission at the Price Center is to develop ideas and illuminate strategies to improve the quality of life for people living in low-income urban communities. This work embodies that mission, and we conduct that mission with partnered work. We educate students to go out and do that work, and we also conduct research. This event really does focus on a topic that is central, as I noted. We must make changes to understand how to simplify and streamline the process to support working families and create greater economic mobility for low-income populations. It is with great pleasure that I introduce our first speaker today, Los Angeles County Supervisor Holly J. Mitchell. I had the distinct privilege to first meet Supervisor Mitchell right at our last in-person event when she was then Senator Mitchell. It was an event the Price Center did with the Schwarzenegger Institute focusing on our unhoused population. She has continued to serve our communities in powerful ways since becoming elected to the Board of Supervisors in 2020. Supervisor Mitchell has made poverty alleviation a countywide priority, and she's anchored an equitable recovery plan from the health and economic pandemic caused by COVID-19. Within her first year as supervisor, and with support from the County Board of Supervisors, she helped to lead the passage of a landmark guaranteed universal basic income program, helping to make LA County the first in the nation to phase out urban oil drilling, and has strengthened the county's ability to quickly respond to mental health crises among our unhoused residences. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome Supervisor Mitchell to provide us some opening remarks. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and hey, Gary. First of all, let me say you can't see it, I'm wearing my Compton Community College hoodie today, but because I'm doing that and because Price Center was hosting this, I went and got my mother's cowbell. My mother was a Trojan, class of 58, and actually got her degree in social work, Gary. So thank you. I wanted to pay homage. Gary, I'm a little embarrassed that was our first meeting because those of you who don't know me may not know that I do have the capacity to show out. And I showed out at that convening. I showed out at that convening because I got mad. I got mad when I sat and listened to a number of, quite frankly, former governors point the finger at current sitting legislators in terms of their perception that we were failing with regard to poverty alleviation. And I sat there in the audience waiting for my turn to go up on stage. And just in my mind, I clicked through actions that not only they had taken and led, but every level of government had taken and led over the past 10, 15 years that got us to the place where we were. You know, we were there in a room with a governor who had proposed the wholesale elimination of CalWORKs. It was my responsibility to remind him of that. I was sitting there with a former pro tem who had reduced the CalWORKs cash grant by 8% plus. It was my responsibility to remind him of that. And my point was that if we aren't mindful of the actions we've all taken, albeit in tough budget years, we will never get out of this. We will never find ourselves out of this tipping point, if you will, where we get to a point in public policy where we're making good progress and we hit a plateau and then we backslide. And so, you know, your report today examining the complex social safety net for low-income working families, the fact that complex is in that sentence is a problem. And all of you with your work and me as a policymaker can do something about changing that. So thank you, Gary. I'm glad to know that you invited me back after I got up on that stage and showed out that day because I was pissed. And I'll be more civil today, I promise. I want to thank my county family, Antonia and Kelvin. You know, Antonia and I met when I was in the legislature, And we're always scheming and coming up with ways to simplify the safety net. I chose to run for public office, given my own professional background. But from my perspective, the recipient, it is supposed to be, government has a responsibility to build the door that any family can walk through, and we're supposed to figure out what hallway to send them down. We're not, the families who are in crisis, who need support, aren't supposed to have to figure out to navigate all these complex entryways, rules, regulations, undue burdens that we put on them to continue to qualify for programs that we know they already qualified for. And so I'm thrilled that you all are having this conversation. I came to this work, I was sitting here making notes as we were ready to go on, and realizing that, frankly, my entire professional career, I have worked to disrupt poverty, to alleviate poverty. From my work as a ledge staffer, going back 30 years, to my work as an advocate for the Western Center on Law and Poverty, where we work to simplify the Healthy Families application, where as a non-attorney, I would be in the room saying, come on, Department of Public Social Services, come on, Medi-Cal, do you really want to get sued again? Let's really answer these questions about, are we making this harder for families to qualify, and why? Years I worked trying to get rid of various and sundry asset tests, to my work at Crystal Stairs, where I was then running the childcare subsidy program, and again, looking to the legislature to simplify and make it clear. My painful years at Crystal Stairs, and you're going to talk about this in your report, where I actually, on an occasion or two, counseled families to not take that raise, to not take that pay increase, because I knew that public policy had created an absolute cliff effect where people would fall off. I was a member of the legislature when, tragically, once again, we told people who we told to go to work in CalWORK so they could continue to get their cash grant. Well, then we reversed ourselves in our policies and told them, if you have kids younger than 2, stay home. And so I have seen how public policy decisions create this start and stop conundrum, where we're asking families to step up and figure out ways toward their self-sufficiency journey. And yet sometimes in the policymaking arena, we pull the rug right out from under them. So I'm thrilled to see your study. Please know that I'm continuing with my poverty disruptor orientation. I think I can't help it. My parents met as eligibility workers working for LA County. So it is quite literally in my blood. This is the work I believe I was born to do. And I'm not going to stop until we continue to get past that tipping point and make progress. Very proud to have brought forth a motion since I've been on the Board of Supervisors to help create a poverty alleviation initiative for the Board of Supervisors to pilot and to support Antonio and partner with Hilda, who did a separate motion around guaranteed basic income. Because my view and vision and hope with a guaranteed basic income program is to have a direct impact on our government social safety net, where we will stop criminalizing poor people, creating rules and regulations and extra hoops for them to jump through to justify getting the government support. If we can understand that every family wants the same thing for their children and honor them in that, I think we will get much further along in creating equity and justice for every child born in LA County. I famously told Governor Brown one day when we were talking about maximum family grant, a bill that took me 4 years to get through the process, that there were no queens in welfare. Because when you consider the average CalWORKs cash grant, that wasn't enough to maintain a queen-like lifestyle. And furthermore, with regard to maximum family grant, that there was no woman alive, and I argue that she is yet to be born, who would have a baby for an additional $112 a month. Those are the kinds of policies that California families have had to live with. Those are the kind of policies that all of you on the panels who will be speaking, the participants know, get us nowhere near creating a level playing field for every family. So thank you very much for allowing me to kick you off. I appreciate it. And please know how deeply I respect and admire the work you all do. And I hope that you will count me as a partner in poverty disruption. All right, SC. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Mitchell. I am happy to have you show out anytime, any place. So thank you. And we'll do it virtually today. Hopefully we'll be able to do it in person again soon.
I look forward.
So now I have the great opportunity to transition to actually share with colleagues of the research and the research partnership that really stimulated this work. In so doing, Dr. Soledad Gagorio is going to present the majority of the research, but to get us started, our key partner in this work, the CEO of Imagine LA, Jill Bauman.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us to really dive into this really, really important work. Imagine LA, I'm the CEO of Imagine LA, and we are absolutely dedicated to ending the cycle of family homelessness and poverty. And I want to say that again, and poverty. It's one thing to get people back into a home. It's another to really, really help them get out of the cycle of poverty. And that's what we're dedicated to. And in fact, we've been working together with families for 14 years. And what we were finding is the families were doing pretty well. They were, and most of these are single moms. They get a job. The kids are doing better in school. We're getting regular health care, wellness, et cetera. But guess what? They're still mired in poverty. So we decided, with the help of the Carl and Roberta Deutsch Foundation, to really lean in. And we built a task force on economic mobility, of which a number of the panelists here today were part of that task force. And we leaned into 4 things. 1, living wage careers. 2, childcare. 3, financial fitness. And 4th, the topic of today is navigating the black box of social benefits. For the last 14 years, Imagine LA case managers and their families have been wondering how this whole thing works. And it punches you in the stomach. You hear of benefit cliffs, so you don't want to work anymore, for fear you lose your benefits. And when we started to try to dive deep to find out what was going on, we realized there was no place that actually had the knowledge in one place of what were all the benefits and how did they all interact. So that brought us to our partnership with USC Price Center for Social Innovation. We're so fortunate to have met them and had the leadership of Gary and Caroline and then Soledad on our team, and they've just been amazing. And you're going to see how they have, in an incredibly systematic and thoughtful and revealing way, looked at this black box of social benefits and they're really showing us what's going on. And it's been a huge effort. I want to thank everyone that was on the Economic Mobility Task Force. I want to thank the Imagine LA board led by Teddy Kapoor for encouraging us. And again, for everybody that just really leaned into this work. It's particularly DPSS. Luther Evans Jr. was an amazing resource, and there were many, many others. Okay, now to reveal the wonderful work of USC, Soledad.
Hi, everyone. My name is Soledad Gagorio. I'm a postdoctoral scholar at the USC Price Center for Social Innovation. So Gary and I will present this work, which we conducted with Rebecca Smith and Molly Creighton. And we'd also like to thank Colleen Caprera, who worked with us at the beginning of the project. And the project is titled Examining the Complex Social Safety Net for Low-Income Working Families, How Benefits and Resources Respond to Increases in Wages. And as background and following Jill's introduction, here in the US, we have created the social safety net that's comprised by both cash and in-kind benefits that are available to low-income families and individuals. And this social safety net was created with the objective of supporting families while at the same time encouraging work. And the goal of this project, as Jill mentioned, was to dive in and to understand how well this social safety net is achieving this objective, the objective of supporting the lowest income families while at the same time encouraging work. So I'll start with a very quick spoiler of our findings so you know where we're headed. First of all, we find, yes, there is a safety net. There's a multitude of programs and benefits that families can receive, but we also found that navigating the safety net is very, very complicated. The net is comprised by dozens of programs at different levels, so local, state, federal levels. Several are tax credits that require families to file taxes, so they pay for the expense first, then they file taxes, then they wait for that credit to come back. And each program has its own application rules and processes. And this complexity really leads to a lot of can lead to a lot of confusion, missed benefits, and inconsistency in resources received. We find that as income, so the wages people receive rise, the total resources that families have don't rise at that same pace because benefits start decreasing. And this is expected, and it's by design, since the safety net is meant to support families that are struggling. As they earn more, they're expected to need less support, so these supports are withdrawn gradually. We also find that families must reach a very, very low income level to be caught by the safety net and actually be eligible for most of the available programs. Even though they are there, if families don't reach that very low income point, they can't even be eligible for some of the programs. Finally, we also find that the safety net is particularly supportive of families with young children, since it provides access to childcare benefits and tax benefits for childcare and young children. And now I'll take a step back and go over some of the key concepts we'll be using in this work. So first, total resources. This is the sum of earned income, so anything they obtain through their work, and benefits that families have available at any given point in time. So the benefits can be in cash or in kind, and in kind can be goods or services. So benefits such as Medi-Cal or CalFresh food stamps, they're both in-kind benefits, and we estimate their value to add them to these total resources available. Second, we have the term benefits cliff. And this is when wages increase and trigger a greater loss of benefits, leaving families with fewer overall resources despite this increase in wages. Okay, so you have a small increase of wages, or you add a couple of work hours, and that means you can fall off of a program, and that creates a cliff in your total resources available. And there's a possibility that having these cliffs would act as work disincentives, as was mentioned as well, when you might be suggesting to people, don't take on those extra hours because you won't be able to continue on this specific program. And third, resource plateau. This is when a wage increase triggers an equivalent loss in benefits. So it's not, you don't have the cliff where you're left off worse off, you're just equal in terms of the total resources. So what we did with this work, first, we identified all benefit programs and tax credits that are available to families in Los Angeles. This was a list of 30 programs at the federal, state, so California, and local Los Angeles County levels. After that, we focused on programs that fulfilled two requirements. The first is that eligibility must be determined by an income level, so an income limit, sorry. This means that we could clearly calculate if a family is eligible and the amount of benefit they would receive. The second requirement was that the benefits provided were sustained in time, so at least 1 year. And this was to exclude short-term programs such as temporary rental assistance, because we wanted to paint a little bit more permanent picture. And this brought us down to 14 programs. Most are at the federal and state levels. Once we identified these 14 programs, we coded the eligibility rules and the benefit determination rules for each program and tax credit. Oftentimes these are different. So each program will have specific rules to determine if you're eligible for them and other income levels and rules for the actual amount of the benefit. And after doing this, we were able to estimate the total resources available to a family at different income levels. And at this stage, we also estimated the value of in-kind benefits, such as childcare or healthcare. And throughout the process, and this is a very key point, we consulted with experts that were very generous with their time and their expertise to make sure that we were including all the relevant programs and making all the appropriate assumptions and that our calculations were sound as we were moving forward. And finally, a note here is that we focused for this work in particular on a single parent family with children. And what I'll present today is focused on a single parent family with 2 young children, so ages 3 and 6. And we estimated the total income needed to cover basic needs for this family in Los Angeles County. That's our reference point. We're using that as the reference. And this is a list of the 14 programs by category. I'll go through them very quickly. Under income assistance, we have CalWORKS, which is a California version of TANF, the federal and state earned income tax credits. Under housing, we have the Housing Choice Voucher Section 8, also known as Section 8. We do not include short-term programs. For healthcare, we included Medi-Cal, SCHIP, My Health LA, Covered California, which is the Affordable Care Act. And I skipped utilities. We also include those 2 smaller programs that provide utility subsidies. For childcare, the selection was a little bit different because there were several programs available that families could be accessing at the same time or in parallel. But not all of them are available to all families that are eligible. So we ended up selecting CalWORKS childcare subsidies, which are available to any family that is eligible for them. And for food assistance, we include CalFresh, which is California's SNAP program, and the Women, Infant, and Children Nutrition Program. This list does not include all the tax code and some other tax credits that we also included, especially when calculating the earned income that they were receiving. And this slide is to show the complexity of the social safety net. Okay, so each line in this graph represents the estimated value of one benefit program for this mother and 2 young children receiving. So the key here is that they are receiving all programs they are eligible for. And for example, this gray line here represents a housing choice voucher, so Section 8. And this is continuous eligibility. So once the family receives the program, the amount of benefit they receive, so this is the amount, the vertical axis, at different income levels, which is the horizontal axis. As a note, a family with income over $50,000 would not be initially eligible for Section 8. So this family must have fallen, their income must have fallen lower than that to become eligible, and then they can continue receiving Section 8 until past that point because it gradually decreases. Okay, as another example, the orange line represents CalWORKS childcare, and you'll see that this first flat section is stage 1, which covers the total cost of childcare. That's why it's a flat line. And then above an income of $34,000 around here, the family is now eligible for stages 2 and 3, and not stage 1 anymore. And these require a co-payment. So the benefit decreases until an income of $65,000. And this is similar for the other programs. You'll see they have different benefit levels. They decrease in different ways. And another note is some are linked to each other. So for here, receiving this childcare benefit decreases the amount of CalFresh, which is the blue line, because it's assumed that some meals are provided at the childcare center. If this family were not receiving CalWORKS childcare, they would be receiving more in CalFresh. So that's one point of like how complicated this is to show, because you have to calculate them also coordinated. Okay, and this slide is really the sum of the work we did. Here we add up all the benefits at different income levels. So again, this is income level, sorry, the horizontal axis is income level, vertical axis is total resources. So their net earned income plus all the benefits and the programs they receive. And we have you'll see 3 lines here because we created 3 different scenarios. The red line is a family receiving all programs they are eligible for, which includes CalWORKs and Section 8. We know that is not what we see often. This is not the most common case. And so we also did these other 2 scenarios. The blue line is receiving all programs except for Section 8. And the yellow line excludes both Section 8 and CalWORKs. And overall, we see rather smooth lines with some cliffs that are associated with losses of specific programs. I'll point some out. Here is when the mother loses Medi-Cal health insurance. Then the next one is when they switch from CalWORKs stage 1 childcare to stages 2 and 3. This cliff here, which is only for the family that does not have CalWORKs in Section 8, is when they lose CalFresh and WIC. And this one at the end is when the children lose their health insurance, which is S-CHIP at this point. Okay. And I'll dive into some of the findings for each line here. So for scenario 1, just as a reminder, it's all benefits with housing and CalWORKs. At every level of income, this family can afford basic living expenses. And I saw a question in the chat about how we calculated the living wage. That number, we based it off of the MIT living wage calculator, and we adjusted it for LA County and for the most recent data we had. So this includes everything from rent, childcare, transportation, clothing, meals, everything you need to live. For this family, this is 1 adult with 2 young children. And it's a 3 and a 6-year-old. 6-year-old is assumed to be going to school, so needing part-time childcare. And the 3-year-old would need full-time childcare. So that's how we came up with that dotted line. And you can see that only if they are receiving all the benefits, including housing, are they able to cover those living expenses. In scenario 2, when we take out the housing voucher, family cannot afford basic living expenses at any income level, even working 40 hours a week at $15 per hour, which is an income of $30,000. So around here, there's still quite a gap to reach the living wage. With scenario 3, the gap is even larger. So if this parent is working full-time at a $15 per hour job, they still cannot achieve a living wage, okay? And this graph is allows us to look under the hood of this second scenario. So remember this blue line, which we think is a little bit more likely because the family is receiving CalWORKs, all other programs, but not the housing choice voucher. And this is showing us exactly where all the funding or the resources are coming from at every income level. We see that at the lowest income levels, CalWORKs and cash aid are providing important resources for this family, and these are decreasing as income increases. Okay, EITC increases as earnings increase because by design it's to incentivize work. And one final thing here, is that this one also allows us to show that the cliffs may not be as stark as we were expecting, because as one program ends, so here the mother's losing Medi-Cal, but now she's eligible for the Affordable Care Act. So she can purchase healthcare through there, which helps subsidize her healthcare and lowers that impact. Same with childcare. When they lose the CalWORKs childcare subsidies, they can start receiving the Child and Dependence Care Child Tax Credit, which is makes this dip smaller than the actual cliff of the CalWORKs childcare program. And I'll pass it on to Gary.
Thank you so much, Dr. De Gregorio. And it is pretty clear that this was complicated for one family with one set of kids, age 3 and 6. I invite you to look at the full report where we do look at the same sort of calculations and so forth for 2 additional families, specifically one with older families, and then an immigrant family that whose parents are not fully documented, but the children was born in the US. And you can imagine all sorts of iterations around this, and this speaks to some of our recommendations as well. But I think just to summarize where we started and kind of previewing the findings, if you are a glass half full type of person, then you'll say, hey, the safety net is particularly supportive for families with young children. And so you might focus on that little piece of good news. If you're not a glass half full person, you would then immediately recognize, but that only works if you receive housing. And we know that only 1 in 5 eligible households actually receive the housing. So then the good news is only for 20% of families, and childcare. And specifically, as noted in the final finding that is listed here, your income must fall extremely low, and you have to qualify for CalWORKs before you get the relatively generous childcare benefit. So to that end, the safety net really isn't working for most families. You can see how it can work for some families, and maybe that gives us a path forward to think about what needs to be done so that it can be supportive. The second finding, I think, is that for most families, as earned income increases, we do see long resource plateaus. Back when I first started studying this issue 30 years ago, benefit cliffs were actually quite stark. So once you got income above a certain level, in particular, if you lost your Medi-Cal here in California, Medicaid more generally, you had a huge cliff. And so there was really no kind of coming back from it. Now, the way the system works, you actually often do see programs funded a lot of times through the tax system to kind of take up the slack when you lose a safety net benefit or a social service of some kind. There's oftentimes a tax credit to replace it. But that leads to the third point, that navigating the safety net is incredibly complicated. I think before we started this research, we didn't realize how much now the safety net, as your income increases, is shifting from social safety net programs that caseworkers are familiar with to actually tax credits, which many of them have not been trained fully in. And so you actually need a tax attorney or an accountant to kind of help guide through this. And as you know, individuals may not have the resources to pay for that. And so this leads to our recommendations, from the perspective of the research team, Soledad and myself. So what we recommend from our perspective is that we have to take focused action at the federal, state, and local level to, number one, create better transparency in terms of how all the social safety net kind of system benefits work, so that people can understand how you move from a benefit program that might be monthly to a tax credit program that might only be received once a year. And so that takes not just a knowledge of that shift, but it also takes some financial planning to navigate that, unless we can move more toward tax credits that can be paid on the monthly basis, like we had in the American Rescue Plan for the child tax credit. As is part of this transparency, I think we'll be able to promote increased participation in the benefit programs as well. And the way to do something like this, we'll talk about in the panel, how you can actually create this transparency. A second recommendation is that you don't want to wait until someone qualifies for CalWORKs in order to have them qualify for all benefits. If we're really thinking about a safety net that catches people when they have a downturn in income, they lose one part-time job, et cetera, we want to make sure that the safety net provides the support necessary all along income levels. And so in particular, the Build Back Better agenda included a lot more support for childcare. Both for the individuals who might pay for childcare, but also for the childcare system. I think what our research shows is that you do have to support childcare at all levels of income in order for you to actually have the equivalent of some sort of living wage income for households at levels of income of earned income of 20,000, 30,000, 40,000. And that's really important to support, our moderate income families. And then finally, we have to increase access to housing benefits. You can see in the research that no one gets to a living wage without actually receiving housing assistance. And so that's first and foremost what we need to do. Now I'd like to invite Jill Bauman to provide her kind of recommendations from her perspective at Imagine LA. And then she'll introduce our official respondent, Antonia Jimenez, who's the director of the Department of Public Social Services at the County of Los Angeles. Jill?
Thank you, Gary. And this research and what your team has done is so fantastic. I think I'm a very visual person. So what I'm seeing is that you've revealed a spider web that doesn't particularly work very well as a net, nor as a springboard, but rather as sort of a sticky mess that we can get stuck in and try to navigate and so forth. And as Holly said in the very beginning, we got to simplify, we've got to clarify, we've got to create some transparency, streamline policies. From my point of view at Imagine LA and working with families, I see four things coming out of this. One, I see the need for transparency and knowledge around how all of these 1430 programs work. And Imagine LA is actually working with a number of different organizations right now to come up with a social benefit calculator that will show, help people navigate these benefits, show what will happen to their wages as they increase, and help both case managers and their families really navigate this. And things like, you told us that there's cliffs, but there's patches, EITC is there, but a lot of people don't even know that is there. So there's this big gap in trying to navigate that. So really creating, blowing up the black box, making it transparent, making it navigable is one of the things. And Imagine LA is really leaning into that. The second that you really said is we've got to look at each of these benefits and how do they actually work and work together and streamline them, simplify them. And so many people are leaning in. We're putting together a coalition around that. And excited to do that work. I also think that this really shows that there's a call for the living wage, for real living wages, because as this showed, you work 40 hours a week at a minimum wage job, there's no way you're getting anywhere. You're still mired in poverty. So we really got to lean into living wage jobs and careers. And last but not least, remember we talked about this is all about getting people out of cycles of poverty. And Section 8 and housing subsidies were the only way to do it, but it actually created the greatest disincentive to work, which, you didn't earn any more money or any more, you didn't have a benefit if you worked more than 10 hours a week. So it's a really complicated system, and there's a lot of great people on this call and involved that really want to simplify this to create both the safety net for families falling through. Maybe we could prevent some homelessness if we created a better safety net, to really streamlining this policy to create a springboard for these families out of poverty. It is now my great privilege to introduce a partner in this work, Antonia Jimenez, who is the director of DPSS. She's absolutely passionate about this work, and I'm really excited that she's going to be part of our benefit calculator effort and our collaboration as we all work towards streamlining this and doing a better job for our families. Antonia.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being here. Let me just start by thanking Supervisor Holly Mitchell and the USC Price School of Public Policy and Imagine LA, and everyone else for allowing me to participate in this session. As the director of LA County Department of Social Services, we have developed, the department has developed a tagline that states that DPSS is the heart and soul of LA County. And we believe this because we are the safety net that many people come. We are the front door that allow people to access all these benefits. And while DPSS cannot change the federal and state policy, we can improve our operations to ensure that the applications and the renewals are processed timely. This year marks the 25th anniversary of the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Act of 1996, which was used to establish the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, or as we call it, TANF. Over the past 25 years, we have learned much about what works, but also what doesn't work, and what prevents families from succeeding in the long term. The program has remained relatively unchanged and with structure around ensuring compliance and verification. Regulations continue to force families to verify the income over and over again. It's a bureaucracy that was established. Government likes to say no, wrong door. However, I like to say, sorry, wrong door. That's the way that the policies are being developed at both the state and the federal level. You know, unfortunately, social services programs, as was discussed earlier, are not designed to help the working poor. They're designed to assist the poorest of the poor. When a small incremental change in income, such as $1 increase in minimum wage, can cause individuals to income out of these programs so that they're no longer eligible, this is what is known as this is commonly referred to as the benefit cliff. And we saw that the $1 increase in minimum wage in LA alone caused 10,000 individuals to be incomed out of CalFresh and 4,000 families to lose CalWorks. So what's critical to understand here is that not only do you lose the cash benefits, but you also lose the ancillary services such as childcare, mental health, housing, and employment programs. Supervisor Holly Mitchell has been instrumental in helping us pass legislation where a portion of the income is disregarded so that the individuals can continue to remain in the program. The access limits in CalWorks were increased with the goal of maintaining families on this program. And the California families in California, families also get the first year of childcare with no restrictions, and it's not tied to employment. They could use the childcare to respite, to go to the gym, to do whatever, but childcare is available to help provide supports for the family. However, we need a more comprehensive approach, and projects such as the one led by the USC Price Center for Social Innovation and Imagine LA are instrumental in helping to develop tailor-made solutions that help families succeed long-term. It is important to recognize that families need to be in the driver's seat of their own lives, and government, nonprofits, and others should be co-creating the plans with these families, since they're the ones who truly understand their needs. Congress and states need to reevaluate TANF and eliminate all the unnecessary requirements and just focus on the outcomes. The success of TANF programs should be measured by the ability to achieve employment and economic well-being. TANF should serve to stabilize families by providing them with the support they need to achieve a living wage, which in my opinion is the first step towards economic mobility and an important step in eliminating poverty. So I want to thank you so much for this work. It's really, really well done. And I look forward to working with you to better serve the families in LA. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Antonia, and for your service to families here in LA County. Tireless service. I've been working in this field probably as long as I've been trying to study this field, and I know how complicated it is. And yet I am a little bit of a glass half full person. There has been some progress, but there's so much more to be done. You know, the number of cliffs, as I alluded to 30 years ago, and how damaging they were, has been softened with patches, but it's still way too complicated and insufficient. So we have a lot more work to do. We're now going to turn to our distinguished set of panelists coming from all different places in the field of social change, from entrepreneurs to people who are leading foundations to people who are working in social service organization and everywhere in between. We thought with this diversity of panels, we could really have a rich perspective on this topic. And so what I'm going to ask each panelist to do when I call on you is to do just a brief introduction for yourself. And initially, as we go in a round robin, as I call on each person, just give a 1-minute reflection on the research. Is there something that kind of like sparked something new for you, or inflamed the passion that already exists even more? So just focus on one reflection. And I'm going to go in the order of the program. If you have, as you registered, we have bios online, full bios and everything. You can kind of check that out. Jacqueline Chun, can you introduce yourself and provide a brief reflection on this work?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jacqueline Chun with the Carl and Roberta Deutsch Foundation, and I serve as the Chief Programs and Operations at the Foundation. Thank you for the invitation, Jill, and I'm really happy to be here with everyone. I think, just in terms of initial reaction to the report was highlighting, or really just underscoring what Holly and others have stated throughout this conversation, is it's complex. Poverty is complex in America, and the report really just illustrated the intersections of benefits and how those who really need to access those resources can't possibly unravel and comprehend all of the varying systems that are there for them. And so really, how can families maximize the resources if no one really understands the whole picture? And so there have been unintended consequences to our systems of support that leave individuals and families really stuck between a rock and a hard place, having to make hard decisions on taking that job with increased salary and losing certain benefits that are really critical to their welfare. On a professional note, the Carl and Roberta Deutsch Foundation has been a longtime partner of Imagine LA. We've been working in close partnership with them on supporting formerly homeless families, providing direct services to those families. As a funder, we're always looking for long-term scalable solutions that really get to root cause, both through systems change and direct services. And so when Jill came to me and the foundation and asked about exploring this work, it just really hit the center of that target. And I think from these findings and recommended next steps, we all know that we need to work together. We can't go it alone, and we need to continue talking to each other, trusting each other, building strategic collaborations with likely and unlikely partners will be critical to our success. And then just quickly on a more personal note, I want to briefly share that my parents immigrated to the US in the late 70s, and there were a lot of language barriers for them, and we struggled a lot, and had little to no help, and truthfully, we didn't really know where to find help. And at the same time, when there were opportunities to seek help, it's scary to ask for help. It's hard, and it's met with lots of stigma. And so, seeking support shouldn't be hard. It shouldn't be scary, and it shouldn't be stigmatized. And so families need to feel embraced by the systems and safety nets. And so I'm excited to be a part of the solutions here and continuing the conversation, and hope that we'll all continue to do more and work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Wendy Guerin.
Well, first, I just want to express appreciation for everybody being here in this way virtually, because it is through our relationships that we develop with each other that we can push forward to create change. My reaction is both sort of hopeful and also realistic. The hopeful part is that the national dialogue briefly touched on childcare. Richard Nixon vetoed childcare when he was president, saying he didn't want to Sovietize American youth. we have to get over that to be able to serve young families better. There's not enough access. Childcare costs more than housing. So we put housing forward as a big deal issue, and it is. But I think we have to, and I'm particularly focused on young children, families with young children, because it's so hopeful. Some of it sounds so trite, we can pay now or pay later, but, my career shows me it is entirely true. And we have to figure out how to pay now. But that is big public policy changes. We're the only industrialized nation in the world that doesn't help with childcare. And so that alone. And then I guess my other introductory remark would be, and maybe my only, because there's so many of us, but would be to say, when I was in graduate school in urban planning, one of the books I read that really struck me was called Regulating the Poor by Frances Fox Piven. And the construct was, we set up these benefits and then we deliberately place barriers because it saves money, quote unquote. That thinking still persists. It's no mistake that the doors don't open. It's embedded. And so we just have to be relentless in demanding change. We got healthcare, and we held on to it. So I remain hopeful, but yet realistic that, and I guess the last thing would be in programs that NGOs can really, community family resource centers, ways to create navigators and connection are just so important, because it's true that none of us could manage to find what we need confronted with this maze. So we can do better, and I'm hopeful. Just being here, and thank you, Gary, for such important work. It made it real.
Thanks, Wendy. Thank you from our foundation partners from our panel. Leilani Reed is someone that I had the privilege of meeting last fall. And in sharing her experience and the support that she received in navigating the complex set of benefits, I think I learned a lot, and it really shone a light, so to speak, on what needs to happen next. Leilani, I'd love to invite you to the panel to share some of your immediate reflections.
Hello, my name is Leilani Reed. I am an alumni, family, and an ambassador for Imagine LA, and a proud member of SEIU Local 2015. And I am a home care provider, which I have been for 17 years. I'm just so excited that this is happening right now, because I did live this, and everything that everybody is attesting to is facts. And I believe that in taking the next steps and getting this calculator and this information out to these families is something that's really big, because it's like writing a vision, making it plain. They have steps how to move and how to get out of poverty. And one of the biggest things is, a livable wage, healthcare, housing, childcare, transportation, career advancement. These things are all important, and, and ties in, because it's like you level up in one area and then you've fallen down in another one. And then it's just like a limbo, because I know people who were with the Section 8, they went from $50 to $200, and then they were just like, you know what, I'm not going to work. And so it just put people, in a limbo. And it's not that you don't want to be self-sufficient, but it's like you in this spider web, trying to figure out how to get out. And I think with these findings, it's just like, it's going to help a lot of people, because it's still helping me right now. And I'm just excited because, I want to go out and be an advocate, tell people like, hey, look at this, take these steps and, just take advantage of, all the information. So I'm just grateful, and I'm just thankful, to be a part and, to be here with you guys.
Thank you so much, Leilani, for making it real for folks if it hasn't already been real for them. I'm going to now turn to our social entrepreneur and entrepreneurs as part of the panel. Then we'll get to our public partners to conclude this first round robin. Britt Gilmore, can you introduce yourself and share your reflection?
Hello, everyone. I am Britt, and my background is in operating a social enterprise that was employing people exiting homelessness, and it was called the Giving Keys, and we worked with 130 people transitioning out of homelessness. So I come from this social enterprise background and understanding through the relationships and experiences of our employees at the Giving Keys that they were facing these really tough decisions about taking more hours, taking wage increases that would impact their housing. And it was through that I really started to understand, again, as everyone's saying, the complexity of this and the hard decisions that people are faced with when it comes to income and benefits. And in terms of just my relationship to this work, Jill and I have been working together for 2 years now on the economic mobility program at Imagine LA. And my role in that was to support the creation of living wage career pathways for Imagine LA's families. And really early on in the inception of that initiative, we had this conversation of what happens when we start to encourage these moves for these families onto these living wage pathways, and they do experience a benefits cliff. How are the Imagine LA team members and family team managers, case managers going to help their families navigate those choices? And so that conversation at the beginning was really one of the catalysts for looking at this calculator concept. And just quickly, my reaction to the paper is I'm so happy that it exists. We were looking for information about this when we started this economic mobility program, and we couldn't find a report of this nature anywhere for LA County. And so the fact that this is now material and it can be a foundation for lots of solution generation is exciting. And I think, one of the things that we're hoping for with the calculator is that we can really understand the size of the problem, how many people in LA County are bumping into these benefits cliffs, because we think that sizing the problem and understanding anecdotally what folks are navigating through will help drive policy conversations.
Thanks, Britt. John Vayne, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm John Vayne. I'm a serial entrepreneur. And after selling my last business a few years ago, I really spend pretty much all of my time trying to make my hometown LA a better place. And so I wear a lot of different hats, including leading the city's efforts to secure hotels for Project Room Key last summer. And as Jill knows, serving on a number of charity boards. My reaction to this work, I think it's super important. And I think it really can serve two functions. One is to provide this calculator, a navigation tool to help people get from here to there. And I understand and learned more through this process at how complicated this is. But the GPS system in your car is pretty complicated too, but you don't need to see under the hood to be able to get from here to there. And I think that this can be a very, very informative tool to get people the right, the available support that they need. And I think really importantly, from a policy perspective, if we look at this as a war on poverty, this can sort of be the AWACS, if you guys are familiar with the AWACS plane that flies over battlefields, to really understand what's going on the ground and where you're making unintended mistakes. I mean, some of these things where they're cliffs, because people are operating in silos, they may have well thought out designs for what they're doing, but not realize the negative impact. One thing I've talked to Jill about is that if you make some of these programs more accessible and easily available, they may be much, much less expensive than letting people slip through the cracks. As recently departed Desmond Tutu said, we spend a lot of time pulling people out of the river, but if we can stop them from falling in, that's much, much better, more humane way to approach these things. So I think this work can be foundational for that as well.
Thanks so much, John. Now I'm going to turn to our public partners, Abigail Marquez.
Thank you. Thank you, Gary. It's wonderful to be among all of you and those of you in the audience. Thank you for your interest and your work on addressing the needs of the working poor across the region. It is my honor to serve as the general manager of the newly created Community Investment for Families Department. Formerly, we were part of the Housing and Community Investment Department, where I served as the assistant general manager. Although our department is new, our work is not new, and we continue to focus on improving neighborhoods, addressing blight, and serving low-income families primarily across the city. Our department's mission is precisely that, to break the cycle of generational poverty by building community wealth. And we are privileged and honored to be managing the city's largest, and I think still the country's largest, guaranteed basic income program that will reach over 3,000 households and will help them obtain over $37 million in unrestricted financial support. And I want to emphasize the word unrestricted, because we've learned a lot from our very early lessons learned from our guaranteed basic income program. And I just want to say that, we've learned a lot over the years. I started with the city over 18 years ago, working on the promotion of the earned income tax credit. And now we've built an infrastructure, and many of our family source providers are on this call, that provide free income tax services to low-income families. We're every year helping them access over 15 million in tax credits. But then we have a very difficult conversation with families when we're asking them to save and having the potential impact to their benefits. And we've seen it very clearly with the guaranteed income program. We've been working very closely with LA County. I just want to acknowledge Antonia Jimenez, who's been a true partner in helping us navigate. We have a pretty comprehensive spreadsheet of over a dozen public benefits, and they're really intended. I believe, I want to say in good faith, they were intended to complement and support each other, but they're really working against each other. And we've seen that. We've tried, as the administrator of the GBI program, we've tried to navigate and seek federal waivers or state waivers or local waivers. And it's a very complicated process. And each system has a different process. They're not in alignment with each other. So again, we've heard it on this call and we've seen it. We saw the anxiety in a lot of the families that we're applying and that we're counseling now as we're onboarding families for the GBI program. So what I would add is that what we've learned from this pandemic is that from a government perspective, we can be nimble, we can be innovative, we can be quick in our response to support families, especially those that were hardest hit. What I would add is that we need to continue collectively to advocate for additional longer-term relief. And I want to emphasize that because I think we are short-sighted. The federal government has provided, just incredible support to local jurisdictions, the county, the city. We've all stepped up, but it's for 12 months. And we know that families are going to be in crisis for much longer than 12 months. And I often share that what we learned from the last, recession is that it took approximately 10 years for those that were hardest hit to recover from that recession. So we cannot expect for families who are hardest hit by this pandemic to recover in 12 months or to recover in 18 months. So we need to continue to work together. We need to continue to advocate together for ongoing and longer term relief for families. So just want to say, just before I end, thank you to Jill again and her team for lifting up the voices of the working poor, and look forward to working with all of you on this work. And just Gary, we're going to be hosting a poverty summit again. We worked together to host the city's first poverty summit a few years ago, and we want to host another summit again, hopefully in person this year in the spring. And just really want to add that through the leadership of Council President Martinez last week, the council introduced a motion to end family and childhood poverty in the city by 2035. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. And I know that together with the strong coalition of community stakeholders, we can achieve that goal.
Thank you so much, Abigail. Lisa Salazar, can you introduce yourself and share your reflection?
Great. Thank you. Lisa Salazar with the City of Los Angeles Youth Development Department. I serve as the Executive Director. I work very closely with my colleague, Abigail Marquez, and just want to start off by saying thank you and congratulations to Imagine LA and USC for putting this report out. I think as a practitioner for over 20 years, working in the City of Los Angeles, we've seen a lot of anecdotal examples of how these systems contradict each other. For me, for many years, trying to understand why high schoolers would not take advantage of TANF-sponsored summer youth employment opportunities, only to learn that their parents feared that those additional wages during the summertime would somehow negatively impact their benefit to the whole family. And, that's just one example for me personally of how the systems are, have these unintended consequences. So I think it's so great that we are all here today. I think it's important that the city and the county work together to develop strategies to reimagine how we can sort of untangle some of these contradictions at the local level that are within our jurisdiction. I know a lot of this has to do with federal legislation, and we need to do something about that. Now that we have this report, I'm thinking, who else needs to be at the table? Who do we need to be talking to? I love being a part of this conversation, but I will say that these are all familiar faces. This conversation needs to move beyond and include those who are not a part of this. And I think, one way to do that might be through storytelling. Recently, I watched a series on Netflix called Made. It's about a domestic violence victim. But in that, really, the filmmakers did a really good job of illustrating in a creative way the challenges and the frustrations of navigating multiple systems to access benefits. We're here in Los Angeles, the largest entertainment capital of the world. How can we tap into that industry to help us get the word out? Because I wonder, policymakers at the federal and state level, do they understand what we see here in this report, how these benefit cliffs occur and what the contradictions are in these policies? So working together with the county, I think both on the policy and the practice level, we can make some changes. And the last thing I'll say is, in the immediate, I'm really thinking about how do we maximize existing dollars? How do we increase transparency and how do we assist individuals in navigating these systems so that we don't leave one penny on the table? And anecdotally, again, I think about SNAP, I think about EITC, where we're not taking full advantage as a region here in Los Angeles of the benefits that are available to folks who really need them. So thank you for the invitation to be a part of this conversation.
Thanks, Lisa. Kelvin, complete our round robin.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, everyone. I think there have been lots of great comments so far. Good afternoon, everyone. Kelvin Driscoll, Senior Deputy to Supervisor Holly Mitchell. I cover child welfare and human services for the supervisor. And I would say one reflection that has maybe three tentacles, Gary, is Antonia's comments around 25 years since we've seen changes to federal policy in this area. And it just makes me think about how fast the world has changed just in the last 2 years. And really thinking about how we take the information from today's presentation to really advocate for that change at the federal level. To Abigail's point, I think we will learn a lot about guaranteed income. And one of the things the supervisor talks about is really respecting people's agency to make the best choices for their families, because they want the same things that we all want for our families. And I think that that's some of the biggest work that we can do in this space. I know Abigail probably knows this all too well. I think the benefit calculator will be extremely helpful to GI participants as they navigate making some of these decisions that we, really hope that they don't have to make about what benefit do I keep? What do I let go? Because it just seems like in 2022, we should have moved past that conversation. And then lastly, I really hold on to Lisa's point around the work that we do is for people's names that we will never know, who don't know who the supervisor is, who don't know who council presidents are, who don't frankly know or care who we are. And how do we make sure that something like a benefit calculator that helps people to make informed decisions about their benefits gets to them? So I really see the work as how do we make sure that those individuals benefit from the work that you all did at USC? And then, good Lord, how do we help the federal government to move into 2021 so that policy is reflective of where children and families are today?
Thanks, Kelvin. And I think that's a great transition point to, my last round robin question before we get to audience questions, of which there are many, is this kind of notion of, okay, well, what should be done next? How should we focus attention? The Build Back Better agenda, unfortunately, fell apart. But there's a lot of pieces in there that might be able to be resurrected in one way or another during 2022. I'd like to offer an open-ended question for each panelist, and you may say, I don't have an answer right now. I've already said it before, but you might want to reemphasize something someone else has said. What do you think is the most important issue right now that either you want to work on or you think that advocates should work on to improve the system of supports for people who are low and moderate income? And I'll just go ahead and go in the same order, just so that people who just spoke can have a moment to think. Jacqueline, as we started with you, what do you think is the most important thing that either you want to work on or you think advocates should fight for right now?
Really good question. I don't really have an answer to that, but I do want to emphasize what Lisa mentioned at the end of her talk, was to look for unlikely partners, bring them to the table, and have more conversation about what's needed, what's missing, what are some of the creative solutions, because it's clear that we've been working on this for a while and we don't have all of it hasn't worked. And so we need to think differently and go and align outside of where we've in roads that we haven't traveled. And yeah, I think I'll just end it there and leave the others to get a little more specific in that.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Wendy, what's on your mind?
I'll try to do a couple of things really quickly. Collaboratively with the county, philanthropy in the county stepped up to pilot providing childcare for kin families. And it was one of the times when the magic worked, and we demonstrated how it mattered so that kids could remain within their networks. And now the state is funding $100 million a year sustainably for that purpose. So I think we have to be willing to do the pilots with light research attached, because it pushes, like the research you've done today, because it pushes the advocacy policy agenda forward. And we just have to keep at it. One step forward, two steps back. My other remark would be around the earned income tax credit. It was a game changer during COVID, and making it payable monthly was brilliant. And we demonstrated it. So I think we need to be running with that to at least make the existing one monthly, because poor people can't wait. Need the money for the exigent things, and it's modeled like a middle-class mentality. So I like those things as sort of the big picture of how do we make change happen. We apply every lever we can.
Thanks, Wendy. Leilani, what do you think's most important to focus on right now?
To add more seats to this table, because this needs to be heard on all levels, and to continue to fight, because you fight, you win. And I know this is going to happen. This thing is just going to, you guys watch. This thing is going to move so fast. Watch. Yeah, just add some more seats. You guys had Supervisor Holly Mitchell here. Put some more chairs to this table and get them other elected officials, important people, get them here. Break it down how you broke it down today. This is real. It's facts. And and we just, all boots to the ground, and we just get out there and just do what we do, and just make it happen.
Thanks, Leilani. We'll build the coalition. Appreciate that encouragement. Britt, I know you at least have the benefit calculator on your mind, I hope.
Yes.
What else? Or say a little more about it.
Yeah, I think I'll lean in there, because I think it's there are many other people on this call that know much more than I about policy, and that is not necessarily my place to step in. But I do think, leaning into the calculator concept of the short-term solution as we build a better understanding of what policy agenda items need to come together. But I think we've talked about this web of complexity around all of these different benefit streams and the fact that they're not well coordinated in many ways. We have to have an equally, maybe not complex, I don't want to use that word, but a comprehensive set of solutions that are well coordinated, that deploy in synchronicity with each other to address this, because this is a policy problem. This is a lack of tools out in the field with case managers problem. You know, when we're talking about what do we need to do, VitaSites was like a very helpful resource to our employees at the Giving Keys. And I think the expansion of that is, I don't know if that's happening. Again, this is not my zone of expertise, but I think things like that being expanded is critical. And then just to emphasize this childcare point, especially in light of COVID, I think we've all seen the extreme burden that's been placed on working moms. And we've got to find a solution. And I was totally shook by the stat that came out from the Bureau of Labor Statistics recently about the number of childcare jobs that we've lost since February 2020. It's like 111,000. So, you know, when we're talking about solutions, we have to talk about all of these things at once. How do we get people back to work? How do we get moms back to work when there are no childcare options? So not to just throw it all out there at once, but I think we have to be thinking about all of it at once. I think that's part of, you know, the way forward is that we do a better job of coordinating these solutions, because that has been part of the problem that's had us arrive at where we're at right now.
Absolutely. Thanks, Britt. John?
Well, you asked for one, so I'll be literal about it. Affordable housing. I mean, the greatest cost people have is housing, and I think making sure that people have, whether it's subsidies or with the Section 8, making that more streamlined, because the cost to society, from a humanity standpoint, from an economic standpoint, from just a self-worth standpoint, on facing homelessness, is, I think, the greatest challenge that we have right now. And I think there's very, very cost-effective solutions, which is one of the reasons I said the work that you guys have done here, while it's you know, it's the building blocks, but it shows that there's a lot of things that can feed into making it more affordable.
Thanks, John. Now to our public partners, some of your response might be how to make your job a little easier to serve the residents that you serve. But Abigail, what's on your mind as like the most immediate thing that you hope can move forward?
So I have two comments on that question. The first is to Britt's point. You know, we've seen a number of reports that have revealed how this pandemic has virtually erased women, primarily from the workforce, because of lack of childcare. And I would just argue that as we continue to offer childcare subsidies, whether they're federally funded or state or local funded childcare subsidies, that we keep in mind that we need to provide these subsidies for women who are reentering the workforce, who may not have the luxury of a 9-to-5 job, who need flexible funding, or be able to provide them with direct cash assistance, so that if there is someone in their safety net, in their social network, that can care for their children. I mean, we hear from, you know, our colleagues at the airport that there's a couple hundred, maybe even thousands of jobs that are available, and women can benefit from those jobs, but not if they don't have anyone to care for their children and their shift is starts at 1 o'clock in the morning. So we just need to continue to design programs with the needs of working families in mind, and that's what I encourage all of us to continue to do. And the second is, you know, to Lisa's point, and I also saw the Netflix documentary Made, you know, but here our department oversees our city's domestic violence and human trafficking shelter system. And what we saw, and John, thank you for your effort, because in addition to supporting Home Key, you supported Project Safe Haven, who's now transitioned over to a Survivors First program, the first program for survivors of human trafficking and domestic violence. And just to look at the correlation between domestic violence and poverty. And I do unfortunately have to say that Our GBI program will reveal that. And what I'm looking forward to is some very tangible solutions that we can all work towards implementing, sustainable solutions to address that and to look at that. We have to look closely at the correlation between poverty, domestic violence, and what's even deeper and what we don't see is economic abuse, which we know is very prevalent in low-income working households.
Thank you, Abigail. Lisa?
I agree with everything that my colleagues have said before me, and I'll add that one, would love to work with Abby on a coordinated approach to share the findings of this report out with our local electeds, our council members. And the second is really at a local level to recognize and acknowledge the complexities of navigating multiple systems for the constituents that we serve with our service providers, those community-based organizations that are on the front line, to make sure that they're properly resourced so that they can help their clients navigate these systems. So some strategy around that. These are two things I feel like are within our span of control and things that we can address.
Thanks, Lisa. Kelvin?
Yeah, I think I would just add, for the County of Los Angeles, our guaranteed income will be over 3 years. And I think that will serve as an incredible opportunity, to Abigail's point, to learn long-term the role of government and how we help families to achieve economic mobility. I think the thing that we can do most immediately, and I think ARPA, the rescue plan, has given local jurisdictions incredible opportunities to demonstrate what should be happening on the federal level. But I think we have to take those learnings and we have to figure out how we get the federal government to implement what we're seeing on the ground that works. And, I can't help but think on the heels of MLK Day and everything that we're celebrating, that voting is a huge part of this, and thinking about what the makeup of Congress looks like, and do those individuals hold the same values as we do here on the local level? Because as much as government can do at the local level, as your research has shown you, it all rolls back up to the federal level. And a lot of the barriers that we face are because of perspectives in Washington, D.C. So none of this is disconnected. I think it's about taking what we are seeing that works, presenting it to our officials at the federal level, and voting to make sure that those who are there, who are making those decisions, are aligned.
Absolutely. And to answer my own question that I posed, as someone who worked at HUD before going to grad school, who studied housing assistance, housing stability my whole career, I'm going to vote for childcare. It was in the Build Back Better plan, and it was all there, and we can do it, and it's critical. I'll go back to working on housing stability for the next 30 years of my career, but childcare is right there for us. Caroline, could you surface a question for the panel? I know we have very little time, but maybe a question or two we'll try to get to before we conclude.
We do have very little time, but I wanted to note that several of the questions were around rent control and rental support. So I would frame them as, Gary, how does rent control and rental supports more broadly play into the social safety net?
It's a great question. Maybe our public partners, if you have some work that you've engaged with where you've seen how rent control may or may not have interacted with the social safety net. Anything in your work, Abigail, Lisa, or Kelvin?
I'm thinking about what we've seen as it relates to the moratorium versus kind of rent control, which I think in your research, shows this, getting the cost of housing to a place, or wages to a place where it doesn't disproportionately burden families, is one of the pathways to economic mobility. So I think whatever the strategy ultimately ends up being, be it rent control, helping to raise wages, or thinking about the cost of living, I kind of put all that in the same portfolio as helping us to achieve the goal of economic mobility for the most vulnerable families.
And the only thing I would add is just on the support that many cities and counties have offered through support from the federal government, is that it needs to be longer term. What we learned is that families and households and tenants were behind on rent, not, the average was over $12,000. And so we need to continue to provide emergency rental assistance to tenants. And it's not just for low income or the lowest income bracket, but it was also middle income households. And so the need to be able to couple this with financial coaching is also critical. It is work that we believe in and support through our infrastructure of family source providers. So I think that's another opportunity to really integrate financial coaching into the work that we all do.
Great. Thanks, Abby. Anything else from any of the panelists on this? I know I'd be happy to follow up offline on the topic at another time. Caroline, one last question for us?
Wendy had raised her hand, so do you have something to add?
I just want to share, I was on a Luskin conference call today. They did a conference, and the eviction situation needs to just be mentioned, because the data that was shared about the hundreds of thousands of people who are behind on their rent and the cascade into homelessness that happens once people are evicted. And so there's this crisis right here in front of us that is probably short term, but yet is going to be profoundly disruptive. And I don't feel optimistic about it, frankly, but and some of the things that are proposed are not realistic. A lot of the housing is owned by mom and pop businesses. It's not all international corporations. And so there's a lot of tensions to be worked out here, but wanted to, and really, Abigail, you touched on this without calling out evictions specifically. So I think we have to keep our mind on the short term and long term. So thank you for letting me share that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Caroline, for seeing Wendy's hand up. Do we have time for one more question? Or
I wanted to lift up one of the things I read in the chat, which was that one of the most difficult things I experienced while being homeless was the lack of available resources for me to be able to correspond with government offices. Without a consistent working phone number or unhindered internet access, it was extremely difficult to be approved and stay in the loop towards my own success of being housed. I hope this is a consideration moving forward. I just wanted to make sure to lift that up for the folks on the call. Gary, I think we should end here with the call, with your closing.
that sounds good. And maybe Jill, you can comment on that question, since that's the work that you do at Imagine LA, and in your final remarks. I just want to thank everyone for being part of this conversation. You can find me at the Price Center for Social Innovation. I'm happy to follow up directly on any of the questions that just simply weren't covered because of lack of time. We invite you to be part of the coalition, as Leilani put out there, to actually see the change that we need in front of us. Jill, can you conclude this webinar for us?
Oh, thank you all. Thank you everyone for tuning in and for leaning in, because this is work that we all need to lean into. Gary and I are part of a coalition. My email address is jill@Imagine LA. If you want to join up to lean in, please don't hesitate to call me or to email me. And we're all here to help families thrive and succeed, and to come alongside, to not be in judgment, to not have closed doors. Imagine LA is all about building equity together with our families. And I think that's what everybody on this call, and probably everybody tuning in, is really committed to. So I encourage you to lean in any way you can. Thank you so much.